I never liked being home alone, but after moving into my own place, it became routine. You tell yourself it's peaceful, just you and the silence, until you realize silence can scream louder than any sound. My neighborhood was the kind people dream about. Clean driveways, trimmed hedges, soft porch lights glowing like candles. I'd lived there 6 calm months before it happened. It was a Thursday in mid-November, the kind of night that felt colder than it should. The air outside had that empty hum, and the wind made the siding creak every few minutes. I'd just eaten dinner, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, half watching some crime doc on TV. My eyes were heavy, the room dim except for the blue light of the screen. Then I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks on my front door. At first I thought I imagined it. Maybe it was the TV. Then it came again, just slightly louder, perfectly spaced apart. My chest tightened. Nobody visits me at this hour. I paused the show, heart thudding, and turned down the volume. Through the peephole, nothing. Just the porch light and still shadows across the lawn. The sound of the wind filled the silence between my breaths. I opened the door a crack, cold air rushing in. Empty street. No cars, no movement. I shut it quickly, locked it twice, and tried to convince myself it was nothing, just the wind. Maybe a loose shutter. I turned the TV back on, but every noise in the house suddenly felt too loud, too deliberate. 20 minutes passed. I was just starting to relax when I heard it again. This time, it came from the back door. My blood ran cold. No one should be behind my house. I muted the TV, my pulse loud in my ears. The knock had come from the back door, the one that opened onto my fenced yard. Nobody should be there. For a moment, the only sound was the wind outside, pressing against the walls. Then came another noise. A soft scrape, like something being dragged slowly across the deck boards. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked toward the kitchen. The beam bounced across the cabinets as I reached the glass door. My reflection stared back at me, pale and tense. Beyond the glass, the yard was dark except for the faint outline of the fence. I switched on the outside light. The yard blinked into view, empty. The chairs were still, the table unmoved, nothing but cold air swirling in thin mist. I told myself it must have been an animal, maybe a raccoon. But then I heard a new sound. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the window beside the door, deliberate, steady, as if testing the glass. I froze. My flashlight shook in my hand. Myself to look, but saw nothing there. Only the reflected wide eyes. The air felt heavy, like the house was watching me back. I stepped away slowly, heart hammering, trying to think. I wanted to call someone, but what would I say? There's a tapping on my window. No one would believe it. Then, from across the house, I heard the faint creak of another door. The sound came from the garage. That was when every light in the kitchen flickered once, dimmed, and came back on. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I stood completely still, listening. The sound had definitely come from the garage. My garage wasn't attached to the living room. It connected through a narrow hallway beside the laundry area. I remembered locking that door earlier, but doubt crept in fast. I picked up the heavy metal flashlight from the counter and walked slowly toward the hallway. The air felt thicker with every step, the quiet stretching too long, too deep. Then I heard footsteps. Soft, dragging steps on the concrete floor beyond that door. They stopped right behind it. My throat tightened. The handle trembled once, just slightly, like someone testing if it was locked. Then 3 dull knocks from the other side. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was so close it vibrated through the door. My hand shook as I lifted my phone and dialed 911. I whispered into it, barely breathing. "Someone's in my garage." The operator's calm voice asked for my address, then told me to stay on the line and not to approach the door. I backed up until my shoulder hit the wall. Everything went still again for a few seconds. Then a violent crash made me drop the phone. Something slammed into the door, hard, once, twice again. Metal rattled in the frame. I grabbed my flashlight, ready to run, but the banging stopped as suddenly as it began. Silence. Then faint footsteps fading away. The creak of the side door, and a car engine starting somewhere close outside. The low hum drifted off into the night, leaving only the wind and my shaking breath. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours, the phone still buzzing faintly on the floor. When I finally picked it up, the operator was still there. I told her what happened, that whoever it was had just left. Within 10 minutes, I saw the blue and red glow of police lights washing over the walls. 2 officers swept through the house, then checked the garage. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, nothing. But the side door latch had been cut clean through, like someone used bolt cutters. The older officer asked if I knew anyone who'd want to scare me. I didn't. I barely knew my neighbors. He suggested maybe it was kids messing around, but his eyes said he didn't believe it either. After they left, I triple-locked every door and sat awake until sunrise, every sound making me flinch. The next morning, when daylight finally made the world feel normal again, I went outside. My yard looked untouched, except for one thing. On the back deck, right where the tapping had come from, there was a muddy handprint. Big, wide, and placed flat against the glass. The prints led down the steps, through the gate, and vanished at the street. I moved out 2 weeks later, but sometimes I still wake up to that sound. Slow, heavy, deliberate knocks echoing in my head. Knock, knock, knock. And every time I check the door, there's never anyone there. But the air always feels colder, like whoever it was still remembers where I live. When I first moved into my new house, the basement light never worked right. It would flicker for a few seconds when you turned it on, then die completely. I figured the wiring was old. The house itself was only 20 years old, in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by identical homes and trimmed lawns. The kind of place that made you feel safe. But from the first night, that basement gave me chills. It was half-finished, concrete floor, wooden beams, and one dusty window barely big enough for light. I stored boxes down there and avoided it otherwise. On the 3rd week, I came home late from work. The sky was dark, drizzle tapping the windows. I tossed my keys on the counter, took off my shoes, and that's when I noticed it light bleeding from under the basement door. Soft, steady, warm light. The switch at the top of the stairs was off, but the bulb below was glowing bright. I stood there staring at it, waiting for it to flicker out. It didn't. I called out, "Hello?" half laughing, half nervous. No answer. I opened the door, cold air rushing up like someone exhaling. The steps creaked under my feet as I looked down. The light bulb swayed slightly, as if someone had brushed past it, but no one was there. I turned the switch off and shut the door tight. A minute later, from the living room, the light came on again. I froze. The basement door was only 10 feet away, but it felt like miles. The light leaking through the crack at the bottom glowed brighter, almost pulsing. I could hear the faint hum of electricity, the way lights buzz when they're old. But the sound had rhythm like breathing. I stepped closer, heart pounding. The air smelled faintly of dust and something metallic. I reached for the handle, but before I touched it, 3 sharp knocks came from the other side. I jumped back, nearly tripping over the rug. My first thought was that someone had broken in, but how would they even get down there? The basement had no outside door, just a tiny window barely wide enough for a cat. I grabbed a kitchen knife, took a deep breath, and cracked the door open an inch. The light was still glowing, still swaying slightly. I listened, but all I heard was my own pulse. Slowly I went down the stairs, 1 step at a time, every creak louder than the last. When I reached the bottom, the bulb flickered. Once, twice, and went out. Total darkness swallowed me. Then, from across the room, a whisper. My name. Whispered slow, drawn out, and close. I froze mid-step. The whisper came from somewhere behind the stacked boxes, low and deliberate, like someone hiding in the dark. "Who's there?" I said, voice shaking. No answer. I aimed my phone flashlight around, the beam cutting through dust and shadows. The corners seemed to move when I looked away. Then something clattered to the floor, a small metal wrench rolling out from behind the boxes. My body locked up. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. I took 1 shaky step forward and shone the light into the corner. Nothing there. Just concrete walls and storage. I backed toward the stairs, heart racing, when I heard a soft scuff behind me like a foot dragging across the floor. I turned fast, light trembling in my hand, but the space was empty. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the door, and locked it. My breathing was ragged, the knife still in my hand. I stood there listening for any sound. After a few seconds, the house was silent again. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, that maybe the light had shorted and the sound was the pipes. But deep down, I knew what I heard. Someone whispered my name. For the next few days, I avoided the basement completely. Every time I walked past that door, I felt watched, like something behind it knew I was scared. I tried to focus on work, music, TV, anything. But every night, around the same time, I'd hear faint clicks and soft scraping sounds from below. I started sleeping with headphones in, but even then, I'd wake up at 3:11 a.m., always that exact time to silence so heavy it felt like it was listening. One night I worked up the nerve to check my security camera feed. I'd placed one in the living room that partly faced the basement door. Around 3:10 a.m., the door slowly creaked open on its own. The light turned on. My heart nearly stopped. The camera glitched for 2 seconds, and when it came back, the door was closed again, but something had changed. The chair I'd wedged under the handle had been moved to the center of the living room. I hadn't left my bed. That's when I realized whatever was down there wasn't just staying in the basement anymore. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I packed a bag, ready to leave at sunrise. But curiosity can be poison. Before I left, I needed to know. I opened the basement door one last time. The air smelled damp, old, like soil after rain. The bulb flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the stairs. Halfway down, my phone buzzed a motion alert from my living room camera. I froze. The feed showed the basement door wide open, but I was already standing in it. My hand went numb. Something moved behind me, soft steps, deliberate, coming from the darkness below. I turned, shining my phone light down. A figure stood at the bottom of the stairs. Pale face, no eyes, just dark sockets staring up. Its mouth was moving, whispering my name in that same stretched-out voice. I ran. The door slammed behind me, shaking the walls. I heard the bulb shatter, glass tinkling like rain. Outside, I sat in my car until sunrise. When I finally went back in, the basement light was off. But the camera feed still shows it glowing. Every night, 3:11 a.m., sharp. When I moved into my new house, I didn't think much about the giant wall mirror in the hallway. It came with the Place antique frame, slightly warped glass, the kind that makes reflections look softer, almost alive. The first night I unpacked, I caught myself glancing at it constantly. It felt like it watched me back. I brushed it off as moving anxiety. But on my third night alone, I noticed something strange. When I passed the mirror, my reflection lagged, just for a split second, like a frame delay. I blinked, leaned in, but everything seemed normal again. Maybe I was overtired. I laughed at myself, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Around 3 a.m., a noise woke me up. A faint tapping sound, steady, rhythmic. It was coming from the hallway. Half asleep, I opened my door. The mirror stood there, catching the faint glow of the nightlight. And that's when I saw it. My reflection wasn't standing still. It was breathing, slow and heavy, even though I wasn't. I shut the door and stayed awake till morning. The next day, I covered the mirror with a blanket. It helped for a while, until I started hearing faint scratching sounds behind the fabric, like fingernails dragging along glass. I told myself it was mice, even though it came from halfway up the wall. A few days later, I had a video call with a friend. She asked who was standing behind me. My stomach dropped. I turned around, no one. The blanket over the mirror had shifted slightly, as if something underneath had pushed outward. That night, I dreamed about the mirror. In the dream, I stood in front of it, and my reflection smiled while I didn't. Then it stepped forward and pressed its hand against the inside of the glass. When I woke up, my hand was cold and damp, like I'd been holding ice. By the end of the week, I was losing sleep. Every time I walked by the mirror, I could feel warmth radiating from it, like body heat. Once, I thought I saw a shadow moving inside it when the lights were off, like someone pacing in the dark on the other side. I started leaving all the lights on at night. Then one evening, I came home from work and found the blanket on the floor. The mirror was uncovered. A single fingerprint, greasy and human, marked the glass from the inside. I stared at it for minutes, unable to move. I took my phone, hit record, and left it filming the mirror overnight. The next morning, I watched the footage. Around 2:58 a.m., the blanket slid off by itself. A faint human outline appeared behind the glass. It leaned closer and whispered something, fogging up the surface. When I paused the video, I could just make out the word, almost. I called a local antique dealer to ask about the mirror. He sounded surprised when I described it. Said it was part of an estate sale from a house fire years ago. The original owner had vanished. He mentioned almost casually that the mirror was supposedly a twin, one of two made as a matched pair, designed to face each other in a hallway. Only one was ever found. That night I put the mirror face down on the floor, threw a bedsheet over it, and went to bed. Around 3 a.m., a crash jolted me awake. The mirror had fallen over. I ran to the hallway. The sheet was torn, and the glass wasn't cracked. It was wet, as if something had dripped from inside. My reflection was gone. I don't mean dark or distorted. I mean there was no reflection at all. Just an empty hallway staring back. I left the mirror outside that night, leaning against the fence, and decided to move out the next day. But just before sunrise, I heard something from the yard, a faint voice calling my name. I looked out the window. The mirror was standing upright again. I could see my reflection in it, but it wasn't doing what I was doing. It was smiling. Slowly, it lifted its hand and waved. Then it turned and started walking away from me into the reflection's version of my yard, fading into fog until the glass went black. I smashed the mirror with a hammer until it shattered, pieces glinting across the lawn. I thought that was the end. But this morning, when I was brushing my teeth, I glanced up at the bathroom mirror and saw a handprint appear on the inside of the glass. My blood ran cold, because this mirror didn't come with the house. I bought it yesterday.